Welcome to our first meeting of the Outcome Selling Advisory Ecosystem. My name is Kasha. I serve as director of this group. I've had the pleasure of meeting almost all of you. I'm really excited to be here today and look forward to an engaging discussion. Chad Quinn, our CEO, and Mike Plaskow, our CTO, are also present, and they'll be participating in the discussion today as well. This meeting is going to serve as an introduction to the group, and we're going to discuss the theme of sales transformation initiatives. We're going to start off with an introduction to the group by Chad about each of the members. As I've mentioned to a lot of you, we've divided it up into different tracks, so you'll also be able to see who is in each of those. And then we are going to have a discussion about 3 topics. The first is the mindset of the next generation seller. The second is sustainable sales transformations, and then a handshake on outcomes. Several of our members will share about their experiences as introductions to each topic, and then we will open it up to the group. And I also wanted to just briefly cover logistics. We are recording this meeting so that we can share it with you afterwards, as well as the members who cannot attend today. If you could please mute yourself when you're not speaking so that we can reduce background noise, that would be great. And turn your video on if possible to facilitate the conversation. And then I'm going to turn this over to Chad so that he can introduce each of our members.
Great. Thank you, Kasha. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. I know we have folks in different time zones and different parts of the world, so it's exciting to kick this off. We are, I guess I would start with that. We are just so thrilled and excited to launch the Outcome Selling Advisory Ecosystem. And as Kasha mentioned in the beginning, we have had individual conversations with all of you. And I think when we talked about this concept of the advisory, we talked about the benefits, and there's the obvious benefits that have been laid out, and I think that the members agree with. The concept of let's talk about relevant topics that are of interest to our business and to our leadership approach. Let's think about emerging best practices and work through those. But I do believe there's kind of a greater value, and that's why I wanted to start with introductions. I think the greater value, it may be implicitly thought or explicitly stated by each of us, but the greater value is that we get a chance to build some relationships here and learn from each other. And the members are the heart of relationships. So I thought we would start with me introducing, and I have to confess up front, my apologies. I cannot do justice to each of you. Your backgrounds are too varied and your accomplishments are too expansive to cover in a short introduction. But I did want to start there because I think that's the greatest value of the ecosystem is the relationships that will come from this as we work through these issues together. And so I'm going to take a moment, again, with full apologies, and kind of give you a sense of the 30+ members that are part of this. And honestly, folks, I'm excited because of how diverse this group is. We have members that are leading initiatives for private companies that are in a high growth mode. We have leaders that are in place in publicly traded companies and have brought them public and are in a different growth trajectory. We have leaders that run billion-dollar practices in mature, established entities and all the challenges that are associated with that. So we have kind of a great diversity of business models that the members represent. We have a great diversity of industries that they represent, and also job functions. Great eclectic background of all types of leaders that are in charge in some degree or some form and fashion of the customer, whether it's a revenue component, a retention component, an acquisition component. So there's just terrific diversity amongst the members. And that, I think, is going to be our greatest strength, because with that diversity will come creativity and ultimately the way that we look to tackle some of these challenges. So I'll take a moment. I'll give you a quick kind of lightning fast version of our intros, and then we'll go from there. So let's pull up our members if we can. All right, so I'll take this kind of from left to right, and I'll give, again, a little blurb on each person. But let's start at the left. Bill has 25 years leadership experience, has run outcome selling initiatives for 3 different companies. So he definitely has kind of a perspective on what works and has a lot of scar tissue and a lot of results along the way. So Bill's going to be one of our key members, as every member here. Jim Walsh. Jim has 25 plus years of experience, runs the Outcome Selling Initiative as CEO for GE Grid, and also has leadership experience at 3M. So a wonderful member in addition. Kate Gutowski. Kate has been seen in the industry as a sales transformation specialist. She's been recognized by a publication called Modern Seller as the top 100 sales people in the globe today. So wonderful to have her perspective as she looks at transformation. Alex Hesterberg. Alex is terrific. It runs all of the customer-facing initiatives for Turbonomics, and so has a perspective across all those initiatives and best practices to share. And we can continue here. Yep. Callan Carpenter. Callan runs a 900 million plus subscription business for Autodesk and focuses on the named accounts, everything from the implementation to the sales to the marketing of that division going forward. Grad Rosenbaum, general manager at HP. Grad was recently by CRN magazine, I believe, recognized as the top 100 people to know right now, and Grad's part of our member advisory. Continue along here. Todd Gustafson. Todd has about 31 years of experience, both from a commercial sales perspective and from a public sector, and is the president of HP Federal. We're honored to be with Robert Makija. Robert is President, Chief Executive Officer at Micro Focus Government Solutions, has both that interesting perspective of both commercial and public sector. Ken Karsten, a public sector leader for companies like McAfee, Palo Alto, and IBM. And Tom Kennedy, he leads the public sector group for Veritas. So you'll see as we look at some of these members, the nice thing is some subgroups are starting to form around a particular point of view. Ned Miller. Ned's held titles, 27-year career. He's held titles of everything from co-founder to CEO. He's currently the Chief Technology Strategist at McAfee. Happy to have him on board. Mike Fraga, Vice President of Public Sector, leads the public sector sales practice for AppDynamics. And Eric Trexler leads that same public sector practice for ForcePoint. We move forward. We're joined in Germany, mind you, by Tamara Schenk. Tamara is a great addition. She is a research director for Chief Sales Officer Insights and has actually co-authored books on sales enablement. Nikki Curtis. Nikki couldn't be with us today. She's actually going through knee surgery, but talked with her as recent as yesterday, and she's excited to be here. She leads all the sales enablement for Slack and has run sales effectiveness solutions for blue chip companies like Salesforce.com and LinkedIn. Andrew Quinn. I should note, Andrew and I are not related as far as we know. Maybe there's some county in Ireland that our families merged with, but Andrew is Vice President of Sales Productivity and Enablement for HubSpot, a true thought leader in learning, development, and enablement of sales professionals. Then we have Tom Quillen. Tom is Chief Technology Officer for Security Economics at McAfee. Happy to have him join our member and ecosystem. Joined today by George Estrada. George has this great combination of technology, understanding, and customer success. Brings those two parallel competing efforts and domains in play, and he's Chief Technology Officer at CWPS. Steve's with us today, Steve Kaplan. Steve has founded the finance team around customer success for Nutanix, has written books on IT. We hope to make sure that the members are aware of these books, as he's really a thought leader in that area, and we're so happy to have him as part of the advisory. Ben Allard. Ben has about 20 years of experience in sales, professional services, managed services. He'll be joining us. He's going to be getting a gold star for commitment as well. He's literally at a customer location. He's breaking out of that to join us midway through. So we're excited to have Ben part of the advisory as well. We have John Mills. John runs all of the sales engineering and all of the pre-sales efforts for Commvault across the Americas, and we're happy to have him. Brian DeLemos, a senior sales leader around security and regional vice president for RSA. Benicia Leese has about 15 years of multinational experience and leads a deal development office for what HP calls device as a service. And we also have Pete Smerald. Pete is really the leader around value management, value engineering for Box, and we're excited to have him as a member as well. Moving along, Dave Clappel. Dave has about 23 years of experience in value management. He leads the efforts for Palo Alto Networks and is excited to be a member of the advisory. Caroline Ruggiero, spoke with her, and she's excited. She's leading all of the value engagement, value engineering, value management practices for Marketo. Michael Weiss, who we're excited to have on, is a technology, finance, and sales executive. He brings that kind of triple threat to the equation and runs the value practice for New Relic. And Jorn Linneman. Jorn has about 21 years of experience, just a wealth of experience around the service segment worldwide for HP. And then rounding out, we have Brian Ingold. Brian's terrific experience, about 17 plus years of experience, regional sales leader, running for the managed print services operations for HP. Excited to have Brian with us. And Marc Bland. Marc is helping the sales strategy for HP's device as a service and what they call their deal development office. So that rounds out our picture. I guess, you know, and just going through that top of mind, it's kind of like the old expression, you are the company you keep. That is one heck of a group of high talent individuals. So we're so excited to have them. And we have a bunch of smart people, so we need to put them in front of a tough problem. And that's kind of this slide that we wanted to introduce, which is this topic of transformation. It is tough, but to the quote on the right-hand side, it's supposed to be tough. If it wasn't tough, everybody would be doing it. The hard is what makes it great. And that's why we feel so excited to bring together this group of folks to tackle the tough issues. As a personal note, this is the picture here is from a movie called A League of Their Own, which is a personal Quinn favorite on movie night with my family. So I give it a thumbs up recommendation going forward. So transformation is tough. We have a great, smart group of people. I thought it'd be nice to maybe introduce you at a high level around the initiatives. So these, to calibrate for us today, I think today can be a thought process around introductions to both this world-class membership, as well as introductions at a high level to some themes and initiatives we want to tackle together. And we'll have some folks talk about these initiatives, but probably at a very kind of summary level, with the intent being, as we drive into one-on-one discussions with you, we're going to build some robust content for you in 2019 around these topics. So to help frame that for you, we have a whole series of topics we want to address around the people side of sales transformation. The fact that there's skills and competencies and traits and behaviors that are so important to help people feel comfortable about even talking about a customer outcome. So there's a wealth of research and thoughts and dialogues and sessions we can have in that topic area. The second is around process. Well, you can have the right outcome mindset, but what are we doing to put it into the workflow of how we work every day? How do we mainstream this into the way a company thinks about its customers? And what are the steps taken in that regard? And then finally, from a technology standpoint, what are we doing to use smart technology to capture best practice and to propagate that best practice and to scale that best practice going forward? So we look at these as kind of pillars that will have content tracks built around them based on the membership's interest, inclination, and appetite. And we'll continue to drive forward in building out advisories where we can discuss and challenge our assumptions on these issues. So that's kind of a high level on the initiatives. What we thought we would do next is kind of break into one of the initiatives and have a discussion on it. So if we thought about that first people pillar, people come down to mindset. And so this cartoon kind of summarizes that you just can't do that by having kind of a status quo mindset. You have to think about taking action. The magic's not going to just happen. And so what we thought we would do is invite one of our members to have kind of a summary discussion with you, high-level discussion of his experience in managing across 3 different companies the mindset of a next generation seller. And so I'd like to bring into our discussion Bill Welch and just do a quick overview of him so that you get to know him again. Again, Bill has run leadership teams across 3 different companies, has really, back to that cartoon, he's made the magic happen. He hasn't sat back and just decided somehow it'll appear. So he has the war wounds and the success of putting this in place in 3 different types of enterprises. So we thought we'd bring Bill into the discussion to talk a little bit about his experience and what he's seen in his journey in moving an organization to an outcome mindset. So with that, I'll bring in Bill for some discussion.
Chad, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. So first, thank you for giving me this privilege and this opportunity. And it is a pretty amazing group of individuals. I was looking at all their bios. So thanks for joining this call, team. And really what I'm hopeful in this time that we're going to be together is that I actually take a good nugget of best practices from many of you on the phone. Many of you on the phone I've actually had the privilege of either working with or working for or seen some of the incredible things that you've done. So look, I think a lot of the things that I'm going to share with all of you today is a lot of common sense, but it's just not common practice. And I will tell you that in the last 25 years that I've had the opportunity to lead organizations, I've watched outcome selling and value management really evolve from a tool to a platform to really a mindset. And, I've seen what happens when you use it as a tool. I've seen what happens when you use it as a platform. I've also seen what happens when you actually make it part of the fabric and the DNA of the individuals that you're recruiting, that you're enabling, that you're developing, and that you're supporting. And, just some things that you'll take away from today, I hope, is that, I'm very much an evidence and data-driven leader, and that when I look back at the journey that I had the privilege of leading, whether it was at Symantec, at HP, recently at Zscaler, and, going from a 300-person company to 1,200 people to 30 million in ARR to 200, and then taking it ultimately public in 18. And then Duo recently, which I'm no longer a member of Duo Security, in the Cisco acquisition recently, which they bought us for $2.5 billion. I've seen how the organization has shifted and changed to this outcome-based, this value management framework, and how customers and partners and kind of the employees are very thankful and grateful for it. But I'll tell you, it is hard. When you talked about, Chad, the whole concept of, hard is what makes it great. But I will tell you, the way to make it great is really a couple things that I've observed. Number one is the team role modeling the behavior. And it has to start with every member of the organization, whether that's the CEO, product marketing, product management, development engineering, customer success, you name the department, every single individual has to get curious about this whole outcome selling and value management framework. I think the second is to showcase those individuals that are role modeling it, whether it's customers, and literally I've seen customers on stage presenting these outcomes and how it's helped them, whether it's partners or whether it's actually the employees, and give them that recognition. And then I've also seen just overly communicating, what individuals have realized as a benefit of really embracing this concept of outcome selling and a value management framework. And what I would tell you is that I've seen it with my team deployed, as I said, across 3, and it would have been 4 companies had we not been acquired by Cisco. But I've seen it where it can be in a low growth company, a medium growth company, and even a high meteoric growth company. I mean, every single one of these companies that I've had the privilege of being a part of, fit into one of those genres. And I wanted to make sure that the team saw the outcomes to their outcome selling. So really, to make it really tangible on this call, what I thought I could, do, and maybe you can advance the slide here to the one that talks about how high outcome selling engagement, is I wanted to pull up some analysis so you can see the facts and the data, and then just walk you through the science of why I believe this type of mindset really has changed the outcomes for the customers, employees, and the partners. So, in this situation here, and I'm not going to divulge, all the companies that we did the work with around, Symantec, HP, Zscaler, and Duo, which one this one was. But what I will tell you is, when we looked at the analysis of over 500 deals that were involving outcome selling framework and outcome selling mindset, those that leverage the outcome selling, number one, the amount of discount given to the customer was significantly lower. And you can see where there was no outcome selling engagement and the discounts were very, very high. And again, I think as operators, as leaders on this phone, the more and more we can control the value for the company that we're representing, the better that we are as far as, delivering on the revenue numbers that, the Wall Street or our investors are expecting. And then the next slide talks about quota attainment. Again, real data, looking at the correlation between the success of individuals and their ability to achieve their quotas, mapped to how engaged they were embracing a whole concept of outcome selling. And these, you can see what would happen is that those individuals that had a high intensity of use of that outcome posture usually were up at the 150, 200, 300% of plan. And, I can tell you over the last 4 companies, the top sales teams, and these are sales teams that are making well over $1 million on target earnings, were individuals that were embracing that concept and that framework. And then the last one really is what was the observations that I saw as far as the impact of outcome selling on the win rate and really the deal size. And again, it was really, whether you used it or whether you didn't use it. And those that did not use it, the size of the logos was small, the upsell deals was, relatively anemic, and then their conversion rates were not at the level that you would expect. And what would happen is those that were actually embracing that framework, you can see the numbers, 3 times bigger, 4.5 times bigger in the upside deals, and really the conversion rates, drastically improving just because they were curious about how to align the outcomes of the customer to using that framework. So, I guess what I would say is that when I look at the 21st century seller and what's making them successful right now, is that I'm seeing that modern seller being more curious, more collaborative, more creative in using this framework. And I almost could liken it to taking the challenger sale and wrapping it in empathy and interest. And that's where I've seen some great sales teams deliver some great results. And whether it's in customer success, whether it's in the sales organization, or even other areas of the company, this outcome selling framework and value management framework has been very successful across now 3 and could have been 4 different companies with different growth rates. So with that, Chad, thanks for giving me the floor for a brief amount of time, and I look forward to hearing from the others to take some notes myself.
Bill, thank you so much for that. A very unique perspective, 3 different environments. Let me ask if there's any first reactions from the members, as I want to make sure that the members have a chance to either, this is a topic we obviously want to delve into much more. We can't fully address it on today's call, but any first reactions from the members that you'd like to ask of Bill, or any comments that you'd like to provide before we move to our second topic?
This is Alex, and I apologize. I got a little noise in the background because I'm in the car. It's Alex Hesterberg. One point and one question. One thing I've noted almost everywhere I've been is that there's the field organizations love to talk about by and large features, and sometimes you get pushed in that depending on what level of customer we're engaging, and not a lot of natural focus on positive business outcomes, and making a customer sit in their moment of pain and tying that to an outcome. What were there particular training methods Were there particular tools, I think we talked about it a little bit before, or a program that you adopted to help instill the positive business outcome mindset into your sales force more broadly?
Yeah, Alex, I think it's a really good question. I will tell you a couple things. One was we met them where they were, and what I meant by that is we tried to put everything into the frameworks of the systems that they were using. So in this case, for example, we integrated a lot of some of the things I mentioned here at the different companies all into like Salesforce.com, for example, because I knew that that's where the team was spending their time. So we wanted to make sure that the platform and the environment and all the things that they are normally using was available to them. I think the other thing we did was we made sure that, whether there were events, like, for example, at a sales kickoff, or whether there was a customer advisory board, that there was recognition publicly of where this, outcome selling and value management framework would either help the customer realize their outcomes in a faster manner, and again, their time to value, which is what they measure. Because remember, once we get the order as the manufacturer, that's when the customer really gets nervous. I mean, we're all excited we got an order, but now they know they have to deliver on the results of the promises that they have made. So those are just some of the things that we did to kind of make the linkage to the sales teams.
Got it. Thank you.
Love the question, Alex. Thank you for jumping in. Please keep going, guys. Any other members have questions of Bill on the journey or any comments on this first point around the mindset?
Yeah, John, I have a question. So, Bill, my first go around with this back in about 10 years ago, went really well. Had a lot of support from the top. In this new role, I'm curious if you have any experience. Have you always been driving it, the person at the top driving it, or I'm struggling getting it up to the one level above me to really see the value in value selling in my market? Just any experience you have on there, any thoughts?
When you say up the chain, are you talking about your executive leadership, or are you talking about the customer? So here's I will tell you, at an executive leadership level, and if you take Symantec, HP, Zscaler, and then Duo, Symantec, it was really about the team above me also participated in this framework. So in other words, they believed in it, and that really helped the cause. Now, whether they believed in it, whether they wanted to support it and execute it was a different conversation. So one, I do think what you just said is very helpful, that you have executive supportive. In the case where, they aren't familiar with it, one of the things that I saw that would work really effectively was to get them involved in some of these meetings, whether it was an opportunity to present the proposal to the executive at the account, whether it was bringing my CEO, for example, into an outbrief of where we linked the business drivers that we had discovered in our discovery phase to our technology. And then they could get their, what I would say is they could get their religion. They would then say, wow, I can see the linkage. And then really at the one thing I highlighted on here too was the discount management. It's pretty hard for a CEO or a CFO to debate with you that quarter over quarter over quarter, you are decreasing the discount, which obviously they're both looking at by using this kind of framework. So I think that that's another thing that would help. Not only was it them seeing it firsthand, but two was showing them the actual data where the framework was delivering on the revenue.
Great. Presenting the proposal. That's a great example, suggestion. I think I'm going to take that one. Thanks.
This is George. I want to follow up on what John started with, bringing it up to chain, but I want to flip it on. Okay, so I could work on bringing it up to chain and getting some of that religion, to borrow your phrase, Bill, on my end. But how about the on the customer end? Because I feel like when I look at outcomes and discussing outcomes, It reminds me a little bit of when at one point 5-10 years ago, nobody wanted to talk about the cloud. Everybody's like dismissing it. Now it's very easy to talk about the cloud. You walk into that conversation, people get it, they're more comfortable. And I feel that this outcome conversation, when you go into a client, can end up being a little taxing on them if they're, if they have some level of urgency on solving a problem and they really don't want to get too deep in the weeds. They might think it's too academic at times. So what challenges did you find on that end?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I think that it is very difficult sometimes at the executive leadership level for them to see the real value of this. But there were a couple things that I observed with the team, and they did a real nice job of. Number one was the involvement of the real doers at the account, where they actually would give you plausible, tangible business drivers that, you could obviously build out that appropriate outcome proposal. But I will tell you the thing that was probably most effective was the customer success teams or the sales engineering teams who would help the customers realize the value that you've promised them in your proposal. And where I'm going with that is that it was really about getting a customer success program going to this perspective of getting referral sales. I can give you an example. I still remember being at FedEx in Memphis, Tennessee, and the customer turning to me and telling me they had an interest in XYZ, and for us to tell them more about it. And I literally stopped the meeting and said, well, wait a second, why don't we just do this? Let's go get Tom Place, who at the time was the CISO at Coca-Cola, who had been using the technology. I said, why don't we just get Tom on the phone with you, and I'll step out of this and let him explain the outcomes and the value delivered. So I think that reference selling has never gone away. And I think what this outcome selling does is it actually not only validates it, but helps support it even more.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, George. And I also want to make sure call out to one of our members, Kevin Train, who's a sales leader at Cisco, has joined. Welcome, Kevin. We're glad to have you. And I think we have others joining as well. Great full house here. So Bill never disappoints. Obviously, we're going to go more in depth on this topic as we build out our content agenda for 2019. Thank you, Bill, so much for sharing a little bit of your journey. And members, please be encouraged. This is a discussion that we will continue to have in detail and research around and share tangible best practices going forward. So with that, let's bring in another discussion point of view, which is our second topic that we wanted to at least just introduce to the members and get some members to discuss it at a high level. And that is around, if we pull up our slide, that's around this topic of scaling the sales transformation. So as an example, Bill mentioned this as well, where you can have kind of a pocket of excellence where we have a particular team that's doing this really well, or a particular individual that's doing this well. What's tougher is how do I go from a pocket of excellence to really scaling these efforts ongoing? And that's no small endeavor, and there are no silver bullets. But we have some members that are trying to attack that in a very proactive way. We thought we would have them share some of their thoughts and ideas and how they're trying to approach scale around sales transformation. So what I'd like to do is invite Ben Allard. Ben, by way of review, 20 plus years of leadership experience in managed services, professional services, and sales, is leading the strategic sales group for Apptio. And I wanted Ben to kind of maybe share with his fellow members how he's thinking about this problem and some of the ideas that he has, and then we can open it up for some discussion. Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So I think one of the, I've been at Apptio now for about 8 years. I've been driving this type of effort for about 8 years. And when we look at the scaling of sort of outcome-based selling at Apptio, I've come to the conclusion over that time period that there's a number of sort of key dependencies or things that need to be put in place in order to scale things. My function, I look at, I get involved across the customer lifecycle, primarily up front in the pre-sales process, I continue through in terms of into some advisory type role when we're in the delivery motion, and then I get brought back in post-sale as well. For Apptio as a company, we specialize in something called technology business management, and it was essentially a new discipline, sort of old, but new discipline in terms of an approach that we introduced about 8 to 10 years ago. As in the introduction of a new discipline, there's an expectation from our customers that we bring best practice to market. And therefore, when we go to a customer and we start talking to them about outcomes, backing those outcomes up based on references and past successes, the question always comes up is sort of the how, right? So how do we actually translate, an outcome into, what did someone do with our product, or who used our product? How was our product used, and how was that benefit actually realized? And so there was a key set of mechanics that needed to be put in place in order to be able to map all the data points, in order to be able to drive this at scale. So for example, if we have something that we refer to as the Apptio Value Explorer, which essentially is a blueprint of what our software does. So you can come into that as either an internal person or as a customer using our software and say, I'm the head of infrastructure and operations. One of the key outcomes that I'm trying to support is around right-sizing our infrastructure in support of our application portfolio. What are the half dozen use cases that I should be focused on in order to be able to support getting that particular business outcome? And oh, by the way, I'm going to need to go and pull data from X number of systems in order to be able to get the information, in order to be able to support those use cases. So what can I do today? What can I do tomorrow based on the availability of data that then sort of informs, what outcomes can I achieve and when can I achieve those outcomes? Now, there's been some resistance that we've had in the sales front end because we're a SaaS company. We're trying to drive high velocity within the sales process. In the strategic segments that I primarily deal with, I've been relatively successful introducing sort of a value workshop in the very upfront stages of the sales process around having these conversations around, what are your priorities? What are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? What are the use cases that are most important to you? What can you achieve today versus, in the future? And then being able to quantify what that benefit potentially is going to be based on those references. And then using some of the ecosystems platform, how do we take that knowledge that we've engaged within the sales cycle, and then how do we then transition that into the delivery motion, and then be able to capture and track and record success post-sale as well. But without some of those mechanics in terms of those data elements that are consistently applied across the pre-sales engagement, the delivery motion, and the post-sales motion, it's very difficult in terms of to be able to drive that level of scale because you've got a whole bunch of people talking about outcomes in a very different way.
Ben, that's such a good point, just to kind of tie and then open it up to the members. But maybe one question I'd love you to speak to is outcomes can be so many different things to different people. Like a product outcome is different than a customer business outcome. How did you normalize and put some definition to outcomes so that your sellers weren't swimming unnecessarily around this topic and were more prescriptive?
Yes, so as part of our, I suppose, our product management, our product marketing organization, we went down the path of being very prescriptive around a core set of outcomes around each particular product and module. And that's how we sort of engaged the customer. We didn't engage the customer saying, what do you want to do? What are all the outcomes you want to achieve? We presented a very prescriptive set of outcomes to the customer as part of that engagement. Then what we did is we then took the effort to be able to say, okay, now let's translate these outcomes that we have into your particular language and your context from a customer side of things. So it was that translation and I suppose that shift in ownership. It was still the same outcome, but it was an outcome framed in the customer's language.
Excellent. Members, any questions for Ben on this topic? Again, we'll be going deeper into it in 2019, but any first reactions or questions that you may have for Ben?
Well, this is Alex again. This resonates really, really well. Very, very similar exercise, particularly at Turbonomic. We went through a little bit of Pure Storage and Riverbed as well, but much like data, you can have data points that sit on their own, but you combine them thoughtfully, and you can create metrics. The use cases coming out of our technology, I found when we combine them in certain ways, they translate it to a customer outcome. And you're putting it in the customer's language, and we always have our field customer success people and pre-sale systems engineers check out the top 10 list for the CIO and make sure that the outcomes that we're stitching these use cases together to complete are matching at least something on the top 10 list, if not many things. Makes it a lot easier to pitch something when you're not down into the weeds, but you're talking to something that's likely budgeted. So that resonates.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about the process you went through from getting from use cases to outcomes to the customer language.
Yeah, it's certainly been an evolution, Alex. And I think, the other thing that we're actually finding right now is you can go into a conversation to discuss an outcome. Alternatively, you can go into a conversation and say, what are the key priorities and initiatives that you're working on, Mr. Customer? Okay, great. What are the use cases that our product or our solution set provides in support of those initiatives? And then through the execution of those use cases, how is that going to support the outcome that you're looking for? So we sometimes do it from an outcome-led approach. We sometimes do it from a use case attached to a priority that then drives an outcome. And just being consistent in terms of language, just around what a use case is, what an outcome is, and how you define it and how it's measurable, how there's accountability associated with it. That's even taken, a fairly significant number of turns in order to get consistency in language. And we're still working on that, to be honest. That isn't completely solved.
Yep, I hear you. Makes sense.
Excellent. Great perspective. And we'll obviously be working much more on this as we continue. Let's pivot to our third kind of introduction topic, if you will, and have some members talk about it. This is what we're calling affectionately the handshake. So you have this concept of the outcome promise that's happening somewhere in pre-sales, and then you've got the outcome delivered in a post-customer success implementation professional services world. Well, what we're noticing and what the members are tackling is sometimes that handshake occurs where we have a clear continuity on what was iterated on with the prospect in terms of outcomes. And sometimes we're not. We're we're recreating that reality for them, much to their own negative customer experience when they actually become a customer. So having that handshake, working through that continuity of the buying journey, if you will, creating those linkages between pre-sales and post-sales implementation and success delivery are critical. And so we have some members that have recently been recognized and awarded on their work in this area, HP, and in particular, we've got two folks at HP that can kind of talk to us from a couple of different perspectives. First, the pre-sales perspective. Marc Bland is going to talk to us about how HP thinks about outcomes in a prospecting mode. And then Brian Ingold from HP is going to talk about, well, how do we then implement based on those outcomes going forward? So I'd love to introduce our HP members and maybe have Marc start us with the pre-sales outcome promise.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Chad. So this call already has been extremely informative for me because, as Chad mentioned, we are still absolutely on this journey. I'm part of the Global Deal Development Office for our Device as a Service business, which is a relatively new business still here at HP. And so it's a big transformation in terms of our sales force from more of a transactional sale to this solution and contractual sale, really focused around outcomes. And a lot of the things I've heard today have really resonated with me. A couple of the things that Bill mentioned around, just kind of the different stages of outcome selling, where, you see it kind of as a tool, as a platform, and then as a mindset. And already I've seen a lot of this is very dependent on the actual sales members themselves. A lot of them are embracing it, they're driving it, and others are having more of a hard time, especially coming from a business that is really rooted in more transactional sales. And so one of the things that we've been doing is really trying to bring greater visibility to those that are really embracing it, and use those best case examples of where outcome selling is really paying off and having tremendous success with our customers and winning some of these large devices as service opportunities. As I mentioned, this is a journey, and one of the things that we had to do as a global deal office is relates to the second topic in terms of scaling. And so we wanted to take a complex solution that involves a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different services, can be very customizable, but create a very clear and compelling story around the types of outcomes and benefits it can deliver for our customers. And so that's where absolutely our work with ecosystems and in the interactive business cases have supported our teams tremendously in terms of being able to structure this into a framework that makes a lot of sense for both our sales teams and our customers. We've seen kind of an evolution as well, where we initially thought this outcome selling was going to be very further along into our sales cycle, where we're really getting into the nuts and bolts. We have the full solution scoped, but what we found is that very early in the sales cycle, our sales teams, even in initial conversations, are using the framework we've created around the key outcomes of our device as a solution or device as a service solution to position it with our customers, even in an initial conversation. We're using our outcome-based selling framework and some of those key benefits that we're positioning with our customers, even in our customer welcome center, which is, very early conversations when our customers are just starting to learn about what DaaS is. And it's really helping customers to kind of understand and elevate the conversation so they can understand the types of benefits and outcomes that they can expect with our DaaS solution. And then I just want to, throughout the process of kind of positioning the solution and focusing on these key outcomes with our customers, it's very much a iterative process. So along the lines of what we're talking about here with kind of the handshake, we will have early in the process where we say, hey, these are the types of outcomes you can expect from our DaaS solution. Using a lot of assumptions, a lot of, third-party research and just empirical data that HP has. But then what we do is we work in a very iterative process with our customers to refine those assumptions, to really define those outcomes that are most important for them, and then using data from within their environment to really get to a point where everybody is very aligned on in terms of the types of value and the types of outcomes that they can expect. And it not only helps, the conversations not only helps our sales teams kind of translate that story, but it also helps our customers to sell it internally. And so they can then go and say, hey, this is really what we can expect from DaaS, and it brings it to a more of a strategic level. So, with that, we get to a point where we're all in agreement. Ideally, we win the opportunity, and then, like several have talked about, we want to be able to then show the outcomes of this, track this into delivery, into implementation, and really prove out that these outcomes that we kind of promised during the sales cycle would be delivered into the implementation. And so, I don't know, Chad, I wanted to turn it over to Brian to go more into that portion of it.
Yeah, I love it, Marc. So just a couple learnings as I was jotting some notes. Iterative process that you really are co-creating value with the prospect. And then if we invite Brian into the conversation, so Brian, how do you ensure that that pre-sales conversation has some memory to it for when you guys go to implement? I'd love you to pick up the ball now that the handshake's going into delivery.
Absolutely, Chad. So, and that's a critical aspect of it is to ensure that we're delivering on the commitments that we made to our customers, because they can see pretty quickly if what they were sold they're not getting. And so we've spent a lot of time, and we've actually started kind of the value-based conversations with our customers about 8 years ago, because we realized that we were having the conversations that we were having with our customers. We were having what was called quarterly business reviews, and they were basically PowerPoint slides that were 150 pages that had a lot of data but not much information. And we knew we had to kind of fundamentally tear everything down and build it back up. And we've come a long ways in those 8 years, moving to a value-based conversation. And I would even say the conversations we have now with our customers, they're not quarterly reviews, they're strategic conversations. And some of the key points of what we'd like to focus on is, number one, if our team is talking more than the customer, it's probably not the best meeting. But if we can have a conversation where the customer is talking more than us, those usually have the right outcomes. We've focused more on not sharing as much data, but sharing information. So, what is useful data that the customer can use to make decisions, monetizing decision making. So if the customer, makes decision X and we decide to move forward with this project, what kind of cost savings could they see, or what kind of costs would be with that? And then having that interactive conversation has really helped us drive forward in that value conversation, where we can have a dynamic conversation. I think moving away from the structured PowerPoint, and here we're going to control the conversation and slide after slide, to and I had a chuckle when Bill was talking about it's not a tool, it's a platform, because over the last decade we've had that conversation hundreds of times here at HP about this is a platform and it's a conversation. It's not a tool, because it still gets referred to as tool. So I love that's other people are having that same conversation. But we've been able to have that dynamic conversation with our customers and focus on what are their priorities, what are the priorities of that we're trying to achieve, with this agreement, and then how do we roadmap those priorities to take those and actually implement them. And our customers are ever changing. Their business priorities change, quarterly. Sometimes their IT priorities change, and we need to make sure we're continuing to have that check-in of, okay, are we still focused on the right priorities? Once you sign a contract, that contract is kind of out of date immediately because their business is changing, and we have to keep making sure that we're delivering on those future goals and initiatives they have, not just the ones they had when we did the RFP, what could have been a year ago, right? So we've kind of got to get aligned on those customer priorities, map those customer priorities. And the one thing we found as we have these kind of value-based discussions with our customers and we're going through, the platform, is that some of the best ideas we've ever gotten haven't come from, HP or ecosystems. Our best ideas have come from the customers that have, hey, I'd like to see what it would look like if we could do it like this, or hey, is there a way to make it, you show me the data on, the cost efficiency of a rollout faster than shorter. And we just had some of the most, kind of informed conversations with our customers and built these conversations over time. And it's actually come full circle, because we are able to take the conversations that we have with our clients, and now when we're going into pre-sales motion, and especially when we're going against current competitors, we can have these types of conversations, and we'll go into a pre-sales conversation and say, let's, instead of just talking about all the things we can do, I like to show our customers the types of conversations that we have with our current customers, so they can see and visualize what it would be like to be a customer of HP and the types of value conversations we have. And we found that has been a very, very powerful tool. And our business sometimes is accused of being kind of commoditized, but we found this to be a huge differentiator when we're kind of going after that pre-sales business, especially with if they're using one of our competitors. because our competitors just aren't having these kinds of conversations. So we can really walk through, hey, here's the value conversation, and they can see and they can kind of visualize themselves having those conversations with us every quarter and talking about the priorities that are important to them, talking about security, talking about cost savings, and it really generates a lot of positive momentum on our pre-sales. So we've kind of come full circle where it's now, we both do pre-sales with these kind of conversations, but then, we have our delivery, and it's really focused on getting aligned. And it was one of the first, kind of things when we were building this value management office 8 years ago, it was all about, let's get aligned with our customers. So we're all on the same page. Let's get credit with what we've done. And then let's focus on the roadmap of things forward. And using kind of a roadmap methodology, it's allowed us to really push sales initiatives of, when we want to implement a new solution or a new software, getting it on there and having that roadmap conversation immediately after we have the priorities conversation, allows us to tie those, here are things that we think could help you achieve your priorities, and let's get those, those outcomes that you want to see.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's so much there, Marc and Brian. I took some notes, just a couple nuggets that are kind of interesting to call out. One is your concept of customer-driven innovation, that some of the best ideas can come from them just reacting and finding a different way to frame something or build something. And then I really like that point about bringing customer success that traditionally is a post-sales conversation and literally bringing that into the pre-sales conversation as a differentiator, kind of like what are the kinds of conversations you're going to have with us after the contract, as opposed to just trying to get you to the contract. I think those are really powerful points. Thank you, Marc and Brian, so much for discussing that. And obviously, we're going to dive into these issues a lot deeper, as we've talked about, in the coming year. Well, I'm very purposeful to make sure we start on time and we end on time, because we're respectful of everyone's agendas, and we had planned this for an hour. So I do want to call a close to some of our first, this being a kickoff meeting for you to get a sense of the members and how hopefully you've got a sample to the quality of people that you're going to be working with and interacting with. And I also want to first thank Bill Welch and Ben Allard and Marc Bland and Brian Ingold. Thank you guys so much for sharing your perspectives. And our protocol is going to be, whenever we do these, it's going to be the members talking. And we will take a background role and just let these dialogues occur and organically go where they need to go. So thank you for jumping in and providing a perspective, one in which we'll continue to iterate on. I want to thank the members. We've got over 35 people that are on this call. That was more than what we expected. We've got great levels of contribution and engagement, which is terrific. So thank you all for this going forward. And I would be remiss if I didn't do this, and please bear with me on this. Kasha, Leese, who you probably have heard from or seen that name before, she's kind of the director of the ecosystem, the advisory ecosystem. And I just want to thank her, because there's a lot of moving parts, as you can imagine, to bring something like this together, a lot of content, a lot of perspectives. And I want to thank Kasha for all of the work that she's done to get us to this point, and the work that she's going to be doing in 2019 on your behalf, on the members' behalf. Couple things, just a couple housekeeping items to think about, and then any questions that we can field, we want to. One is, speaking of Kasha, the recording of this video will be made available for everybody, along with the deck that's been used. So you'll have both access to the video as well as to the deck. And also, Kasha will be sending out a link to a LinkedIn group that we're setting up for the members. Again, if we think about how we started this conversation, that the greater value is the value of you being able to have these relationships and to help foster and nurture those relationships, we want to set up this group where you can have access to your members ongoing through LinkedIn. So there'll be a link out to that effect. And then what we're going to be doing as a next step, an immediate next step from this meeting, our kind of launch meeting, is we're going to be setting up our one-on-ones to get your reactions to some of these topics that we've addressed today, and take our lead from you as to which ones you really want to dive deeper into, and how we can build robust content around those topics as we set up the whole 2019 agenda, content agenda. So that is our next immediate step, will be to set up one-on-ones with each of you. Kasha, did I cover everything, or is there anything you wanted to share with the members?
I believe you covered everything. We are in 2019 going to be having a series of smaller meetings, though. So the tracks that Chad showed in the very beginning, it'll be more or less those groups to kind of delve deeper into some of the topics that we've discussed with each of you, and I'll be scheduling some follow-up calls too to get feedback for upcoming meetings. That's all I have. Thanks, Chad.
Sure, Kasha, thank you. And that bears repeating. Feedback on this agenda, feedback on what worked, what didn't, anything that we want this to be member driven. And so if it resonated, it sounded like from some of the comments that came forward, we gained a lot from each other already in just a brief time, but make sure you provide either myself or Kasha or Mike Blasco, our CTO, anyone that you feel you want to channel some real-time feedback on today's session or going forward. We are hungry for that. We want to hear that and be able to adjust accordingly. So with that, I will thank everybody for being here. I wish you a wonderful holiday next week if you're celebrating, and we'll look forward to having time with you on our one-on-ones. Thanks, everybody.